Hello there everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the infamous, ubiquitous, incredible Cadian Guardsman. Now these are the generic kits, but of course we all know that it's the Cadian armor and all that. We've got all the other different factions, but we wanted to do up a version of the new guy. I've got my old 2nd edition Cadians all painted up in a specific scheme, and it actually very much follows the classic Cadian scheme, but I've been getting lots of requests to do the new style of Guardsmen in those classic colors as well. So this is a response to that video, and yeah, it's going to be awesome. So I'm going to get our friend here all primed up in CORAX white, and we'll get those, you know, classic, you know, baseline, awesome, you know, foundational colors of that Cadian Guardsman in there. All right, so here is the stalwart bulwark of the Imperium of Man, the most lethal weapon in the entirety of the Imperium defense, the Guardsman. And he's all dressed up now in CORAX white, and we're going to start off with some of the metallic points. In this case, it's going to be LEADBELCHER, and we're going to be going pretty much after all of the kind of the decorative iconography, and we'll be going after the weapon and all that stuff as well. So now the reason we're starting with the silver first, kind of the LEADBELCHER stuff first, is because it's going to be a lot easier to paint around. So as opposed to doing the details all first and then trying to cut in these kind of finer, sharper details, it's a lot easier just to kind of paint those in beforehand. Now I'm going to get his little belt buckle here. So all the iconography and all of that, we're basically just going to, you know, just do a nice kind of not crazy thick version here, a coat of paint. And we'll continue along with the rifle here. And so I'll just go in here and I'll do down below for that kind of power pack that's in there. We've got these little metal bits sticking around up here. All right, we can do the handle as well. Comfort's not a thing for these guys. We'll do this little pip, the bayonet mount that's right there, and we'll also do this front kind of muzzle or flash suppressor up here. Okay, continuing on now, we'll do this. I think it's just survived forever, but I think it was originally just kind of like a sight for the las guns. From forever ago, and I think they just kind of kept the aesthetic, but we'll do that rail up top. There's a couple little pips here at the back. We'll get those guys as well. And again, you do not have to be over the top in terms of detail. I don't know if you can see in here, but there's an emblem on the chest. We'll make sure we get that one as well, just kind of on the left breast of the carapace armor there. I guess that's not actually carapace armor, I guess that'd be flak armor. We'll also do the iconography on the helmet. Now, some like to do this in white, but man, I think the Militarum themselves would look at that and say, oh man, that's just dirty. Now, I actually did a pretty good version of this, but again, if you're sloppy, it's fine at this stage, because we're going to be painting around it. We've got the side of the helmet, this piece here at the side. That little doodad sticking out there. We've got another one at the back. Okay, and on the other piece, just at the back here. Moving on, we've got the other power pack hiding inside of this pouch, so we'll get that little bit showing through. We'll get the iconography here. Okay, and we'll get the little top of the canteen. Working our way around the back now. We've got the little clip here. We've got the hilt of his bayonet, his knife here. Grab that. And we also have the frag grenades here as well. Next up, we've got these little clips here on his gaiters. We'll just catch those in the LEADBELCHER kind of to finish those off. And then when you kind of do your dummy check around the model, you invariably realize that you forgot something really basic, and that'll be the stock of his las gun here All right, so with the metallics all done, we're going to move on to the fabric parts of the model, and we're doing that because we're working in a three-dimensional way from the kind of the deepest part of the model outward. It makes it a lot easier to paint, I suppose. You know, trying to reach in and grab detail and all that, while, you know, with a loaded brush sometimes can end up with you having to repaint a bunch of stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go after any cloth in that kind of khaki color, that KARAK stone there. So not the belt, but the bottom of the flak jacket. We'll also jump onto the pants here for the color. Now, anything from the belt up is going to be his flak armor there. But what we will work on too now is the arms. So the fabric for the arms here. Alright, so with the pants, the bottom of the jacket, and then the sleeves finished, there's just a few subtle little spots we want to make sure we don't forget about. And at the back here, under the flak armor, you can see little bits of fabric held up by a suspender in there. Okay, so I'll do that little bit of fabric, and then I'll do just around the neck, a little piece there that covers up the back of the neck. Okay, so I've gone around, done a little bit of a dummy check to make sure I got all the fabric pieces in there. And the next piece now is going to be the flesh. Go figure, we're using Cadian FLESHTONE to get the flesh tone for our Cadian. That's right. And this one's a pretty decent one. Now, I find that the Cadian FLESHTONE goes on a little thick, so make sure you're watering it down just a little bit. Literally, you can just take you can load up your paintbrush, dip it in your water, and then just smooth it out on a palette. And when it's nice and light, you can just kind of jab it in there. Make sure you get in all the nooks and crannies. But this is definitely somewhere where you do not want a load of paint on your particular brush. Now, some people would like to do kind of combat gloves on these guys. So some I've seen people do them in black and all that. But I kind of like seeing the hands. I don't know, call me a little weird, but it's one of those things where I think having that little bit of humanity with kind of the hands, bare hands on the gun is just a little bit more visceral, I guess, where they really don't have a lot of gear and equipment. Now, I did do kind of like an orbital assault version of this armor, basically, where they all had sealed helmets and stuff, and I might do an army review on that. So I did kind of paint it in the gloves for that piece. But for this one, I'm just going to have it so that we can actually see the flesh, and it's not very often that we get to have kind of fleshy models. You know, for the Imperium, there's lots of Space Marines and armor and all that, so why not? Alright, so next up for our little friend here, we've got CASTELLAN Green. This is going to form the foundation of our armor, and we're going to get lots and lots of kind of cool contrasting colors. It looks great with that khaki color of the KARAK stone and all that. So we'll just get them all dressed up here. So now, we had done the metallics before, and we did them a little bit sloppy. CASTELLAN Green is it's a base paint, which means it goes on pretty well, and we don't have to worry about coverage as much. So make sure if you've got like a nice thin coat of it, you might need multiple coats to build up, but I wouldn't worry about that. And what we're going to do is essentially just paint around that metallic detail, and it's a lot easier to, again, go around the detail than it is to kind of paint the detail in later. So I'll work my way around on that on the rifle there, and then I'll also go in and make sure that I've got the gaiters here, these kind of armored gaiters. Forget the knees. The shins is where it's at. That stuff stings, man. So we'll do the gaiters on here. We'll do all of the armor at the back, including the little kind of zip tie, kind of clicky straps up at the top. I just want to make sure we can see this on the camera, but I'm going to go around that metallic emblem on the chest there. Make sure you get a nice fine tip on your brush. Sneak in. Now, if I screw up, and clearly I am screwing up a bit here, you can always go back in. Actually, that chin strap we're going to do with another base paint. So that'll be fine. We'll do it with a Steel Legion drab. So it'll cover over. So if you get a little bit messy, that is totally fine. This isn't about painting perfectly. This is about just kind of iterating through the process and getting the color down. All right, and then we'll move on to the helmet here. We'll leave all those little bits and bobs that we've painted up silver. We'll make sure that we leave all of those intact. And if we ever screwed up, we can always come back and just touch up with a bit of the LEADBELCHER or a little bit of the CASTELLAN green. All right, so I'll just work my way around, make sure I get all my second coats on, and finish up some of the spots that I've missed here. And then we'll move on to the next color. All right, so now we've got the last of the green kind of drying. I didn't have perfect coverage. Obviously, I've gone over a little bit of, you know, the kind of the steel parts here. But again, it's fine. We're going to do a dummy check right after this last color. We're going to now use Steel Legion drab. And what we're going to do for that one is anything that is leathery, any of the leathery bits. So you would do basically their hands as like leather gloves if you wanted for this one. But the boots, the belts, the little suspendery thing at the back. So let's start kind of with what's right in front of us here. We've got the belt. So we'll do that in the Steel Legion drab. We'll do the kind of the power pack little holster here. Okay, that was way too thin. You just have to suck out some paint out of that there. I might have to just repaint that one. But go through here, do the canteen. Just kind of the little wrapper, the holder for the canteen. The leather case, I guess. We'll do the bayonet and the strap. Okay. There's a little bit of belt if you can sneak in there and the inside. Just kind of even that color up a little bit. There's this little tiny suspender at the back that goes between the fabric. And then here on the boots, we'll do the boots as well. Now the last base color kind of detail in here is going to be the chin strap. I'll just make sure that I've got a little bit of coverage on that. We should be good. Now it's a little messy, but it's a little tricky to tell what you haven't painted until you've kind of blocked in all your colors in here. So as I rotate through, you're going to see that I've got some of the KARAK stone that I missed on the pants down here. I missed at the bottom of the holster back there, the back of the knife, things like that. So what I'll tend to do is I call it the dummy check. I'll spin the guy upside down. You can see all kinds of spots that I've missed. I've missed, you know, a bit of the LEADBELCHER there, a little bit of the LEADBELCHER there. And when you're tearing through these guardsmen, you want to be painting them at about 10 at a time on average, and you go through it very quickly. But if you just kind of get your base colors down, you iterate through your 10 guys, then you can come back, do your dummy checks, spend a bit of time, and that's where you spend it on each one, and you just kind of top up each model before we wash. In addition to doing that dummy check, I'm also going to finish up the base to match the rest of my army, and we should be good to go. All right, so I've gone around and tidied up all of the little bits and bobs that I kind of missed before. I made sure that I had good coverage on the kind of the pants and the sleeves and the tunic there, and I just wanted to make sure that I went through and checked everything. Now, from a batch painting perspective, I tend to very quickly across, you know, like 10 or so models, I'll place down all, like kind of block at all the main colors, and then I'll do that kind of dummy check where I go and I flip the model upside down and I look individually for different pieces. You're going to find that you're always constantly finding little bits and bobs. The nice thing about the Cadians here, these Astra Militarum models, is that they're fairly simple in terms of detail. The majority of the detail is going to be on the las gun, but I mean, it's not too bad at all. If we're dealing with like the Chaos Nurgle models or whatever, there's tons of little blisters and boils and all that, but these guys are pretty straight up, so it really lends itself well to speed painting, which is fantastic. So I've got the base done here. I've got the, you know, kind of all the little colors blocked out fairly well. I went around, found a couple little extra areas. One of the areas I should probably mention is back here, in behind the shoulder pads there of the flak armor. You'll see that I kind of snuck a bit more color in there just to make sure that that fabric was covered. But again, we can keep iterating through even after the wash is on because the detail is so simple with these guys. So the wash that I'm going to use is that homemade wash that I use. It is 25% NULN oil, 25% AGRAX Earthshade, and 50% just everyday regular floor wax. And you'll see with the floor wax that it adds as this, you know, it kind of works as this fantastic flow aid, and it allows it to seep right into all those details. Now I'm just going to slop this wash all over, including the base. That's why I finished it up. I like shading the base as well. But you'll see that it sinks into all the details. Now if you don't want any of the additional pooling, you can use your brush and just go in and suck up the details. So you can reapply, and if it's too much you can just kind of pull it off with your brush again there. So I'll cover the whole model. I'll make sure that I don't get any excessive pooling. Like if I see it here, I can just tap that with the brush and soak it up. And I'll let it dry for about 45 minutes, and then we'll come back and start, you know, kind of doing our final colors on this guy. Alright, so we've got the wash applied and dried. I let it sit for about 45 minutes or so, and then now I'm going to work on kind of reestablishing the main colors on the fabric there. So you can see obviously that we've got all these little nooks and crannies, some really obvious lines here, like there's a very little kind of thin line here, and we're going to preserve as much of that as we can. Now the wash did a lot of work for us. We don't want to fill in that detail necessarily, so we're going to take KARAK stone, give it a good shake here, and I'm just going to take that KARAK stone and I'm just going to go over top of just the major highlights of this, of the fabric here. So on the pant legs, things that stick out like the knee, you know, a little bit like the, just that kind of cuff here that going over the boot. Okay, that little bit of a fold in fabric, and we're just basically going with the lines on here, but we're just making sure that we keep all of that detail still at the bottom, and the net effect is it looks like it's nice and shaded, and it still looks like it's part of the same color palette, because you know it is, but we're just going in and we're just kind of picking out the major highlights of this. And you can see even as it dries, it looks like just this kind of faded, rough kind of texture, like these pants have been used, you know, for those of you guys in the UK, the trousers have been used loads and loads and loads over time. And they're dirty and they're kind of a little grimy from the battle, but they're still clean enough. So it just gives us that nice sense of kind of used fabric here. Now with the sleeves here, we're going to do the same as well. We'll just kind of touch up. We'll start with kind of the big major highlights of the elbow, and then we'll just kind of draw in a little bit of color. We've got the cuffs on the sleeves here. We'll do those. And just taking our time, picking out the major highlights. We do not want to get rid of all that work that was done with the wash. Now for the creases, I'm just going to make sure I get some paint off on my brush here. So there's still wet paint on my brush, but I'm just going to approach it from a bit of an angle without a lot of paint on my brush. And we can see that we can just kind of do like it's sideways really. We can just do that kind of sideways over brush over that detail. And then finally, of course, while I'm working around, we've got these little bits at the back. And then that overbrush that I just did, I'll do that again for that kind of raised neck part of the back of the fabric. Now we're just going to add a little bit of a highlight to that fabric, and we're going to use Screaming Skull. It's a really nice color for just kind of bringing out those last little bits of light. Now we're not going to be doing a big kind of overpaint on this. We'll just be picking out the very extreme kind of parts of the fabric. So again, going back to that knee, instead of painting the full knee though, we're just going to catch kind of the front edge of it. We'll do a little bit around the cuffs down at the bottom. Just some of the highest parts in the folds in the fabric. And all we're doing is we're just bringing out just a little bit of life to this here. So just a little touching of that color back in. Okay, we can go after some of these seams if we want as well, these folds. Now with this guy here, with the pocket, we're just going to go around the absolute edge of that, just giving a little bit of light to that. And on the back here, you can see we got our little folds. Those are really sticking out, so we'll just tap those with a bit of color, a little bit across the top up here. And all we're doing is just catching those kind of finer highlights, the pockets and all that. And just bringing just up a little bit more light to give it just a little bit more of a kind of ruddy feel, kind of, you know, really taking advantage of those three ranges of color there. Alright, so we can see that detail has really been brought out on that fabric there. It's a little punchy, which is nice. It, you know, kind of jumps out at us a little bit. I think the big problem we can often have is that it is too subtle. Your eyes just kind of turn it into mud. So I like those nice punches of color in there. And then we come in and we blackline it. It'll really redefine some of that detail that's in. So I'm pretty happy with that. Next up, we'll be doing the CASTELLAN green. And all we're doing here is essentially the same thing as we did with the KARAK stone earlier. We're just going to be restoring kind of the major chunks of color to the armor itself and to the lasgun here. So with the lasgun itself, we're just going to go in and make sure that we get just kind of those major kind of highlights. We can use this as an opportunity too. If we go over a bit with our LEADBELCHER or something like that, we can always kind of crisp it up a little bit. But for the most part, I want to leave as much of that wash in the corners as I can. So this becomes a very fast process. You know, getting the base colors on and getting around things is kind of tricky, but once that base color is on, we're leaving a big chunk of it actually intact as we just go over the major kind of highlights. And you can see how fast that was just for the lasgun. And you can be a little bit more kind of fast and furious, a little bit more loose with your painting on this because you're leaving that detail in. So you're just going for the major kind of highlight elements, and it goes, you know, pretty quickly. And that's kind of the secret when you get an army like the you know, the Astra Militarum, the Guard here. The big secret is just being able to paint it well, kind of to that tabletop standard, and just being able to dump a bunch of these guys out onto the table is fantastic. So really liking just kind of the look and feel, and because we're going for that battle-worn look, I mean, we don't have to worry too much. We can even leave a little bit on the shoulder pads if we want. I'm going to do like the too thin coat thing on here to repaint most of the detail on here, but with things like the helmets, you basically just have to go over those major pieces, and it paints nice and quick, and it still looks really good because we get to make sure we kind of keep and we retain all that detail that's in here. Okay, so I'll work my way around, leaving all those little edges in, and yeah, we'll be right back and we'll do some highlighting. Alright, so we've got the colors restored for the most part on the green. Make sure you got the little gators down below there as well. And now we're going to move on to a bit of a highlight, just a simple edge highlight with our STRAKEN green. And you know, I'm really liking the look and feel of this. It's got that kind of worn look, but it's got, you know, lots of color that your eyes can pick up on. Nice contrasting colors between the muted cloth and then kind of the brighter yet kind of camouflagey green. It's just a good set of colors. So all I'm going to do now is just kind of work my way carefully around the edges of this. So if I'm on a corner like this, I'll just use the side of my brush and I'll just pick out the corner. Now, if I mess up, and you can see I clearly did here, I can go back in with a little bit of extra green and tamp that down. So my edge highlights tend to be a little bit sloppy, and then what I'll do is I'll come in later and then I'll just touch in with the other with the CASTELLAN green, and just kind of go in and fill in any spots that I might have got a little too overzealous on. So I'll work my way around and just doing a simple edge highlight. Now you'll see that there's other spaces that are, you know, kind of open, like the pads here. You can actually go a little heavier on the top, just as like a little bit of almost like a wet brush like this. So I'll combine that with the edge highlight just to give it a little bit more texture. Same thing with the top of the helmet as well. I'll just kind of give it a little bit of just kind of an overbrush at the top, and then that'll just complement the highlights, the edge highlighting that I'm going to do on the other pieces here. Alright, so I'll work my way around, make sure you get the gators down below, and yeah, and then I'll show you, maybe I'll show you that kind of color correction when I'm done this here. Okay, so I've gone through and I finished the highlights, and I just wanted to show you, I went a little bit loose over here, and I went a little crazy on this side as well, pretty mucky. And on the shoulder pads, I did the same thing as well. I just wanted to show you kind of what I meant by that subtractive edge highlighting, where we go back in with the base color, that Castellan green again. And sometimes it's a lot easier to paint a larger surface than a smaller surface. So for me, all I'm going to do now is just go in here, okay, and just where those edges are, I'm just going to repaint from that center out. And it's sometimes a lot easier to paint from the center out, okay, than it is to paint, you know, just that perfect fine line. And so I can go in and touch up, and you see how nice of a line I get out of there, which is pretty crazy. So even on stuff that's really difficult to paint, as I'm ripping paint off with my fingertips here, let's try that again. Even as I go in here and I look at, say, the gators, that's very difficult to get your brush in there, but getting to the major area, not very difficult at all. So I just use that technique a lot, just to kind of go in and just restore that base color. So if I go a little crazy on this side, I can always just go in and paint the larger area, and it's so much easier. And then I get a nice kind of effective edge highlight without spending those hours and hours and hours and hours just trying to get it just right. Because in theory, again, we're painting a load of these guys, and we want to make sure that we're able to, you know, quickly move forward. So I'm going to go around, I'll do the same thing, but I just thought I'd show you that subtractive edge. And you can see as it dries, you get a nice clean set of lines, and it really is not much more effort, and it's a lot less time, which is more important. So I'll crack on with that, and then we'll be back, and we'll work on the face and the leathery bits. Right, so I went and finished up the rest of that kind of subtractive edge highlighting, and again, way easier to do that, a little bit of highlighting at the end. I also went through and just kind of touched up, just found a little bit of the some of the spots I hadn't quite caught for the fabric and all that. So, I mean, again, you're constantly going through and tidying up as you go. Now I'm going to work on the skin, and we're going to do a little bit of extra Cadian flesh tone here, just over top. The idea behind that, of course, is just to kind of bring back some of that that tone without you know, going into and getting rid of all that other detail. So I'm just going to pick out the major kind of highlights here. That's a pretty small face, but I'm just going to go in and make sure I get those elements, and then we'll even highlight like that further. On the hands, we're just going to just use our brush a little bit here, cover the knuckles and the fingertips, and I'm just going at, you know, almost like a side angle here. I'm just trying to apply a little bit of that brightness back to those hands there. Now for the final highlight for the flesh, I'm just going to use a little bit of thinned down KISLEV flesh, and I'm just going to pick out all of the kind of extreme highlights. Just basically the cheekbones, if they don't have the chin strap on, the chins. Okay, just these kind of much kind of higher highlights. And for the hands, we'll just do just kind of the outside edges of the fingertips. Again, just more of the extreme highlight to the flesh tone there. It's pretty bright right now, but it'll tone down as it dries. Now the last part of the painting of the model is going to be this Steel Legion drab, and we're just going to restore, because we've already painted that on there, again, just like the skin tones and the greens and all that, we're just going to go over top of the major highlights again with the Steel Legion drab. And there's a couple spots where you'll see after the washing where the boots got a little bit worn, what have you. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of go over, and all the major highlights, anything that was, you know, kind of taken away, you know, by their paints or kind of worn down, we're just going to restore a little bit of light, but we're still going to leave that depth in there. So the boots, the scabbard for the knife, even this little suspendery guy in the back here, we'll just kind of touch on it. And of course, some of the more detail work is going to happen right in here with the chin strap here. And then just a little insert into the helmet, so that front little bit right there. Alright, so we just want to go in and just reapply just a little bit of that extra color there. Alright, with the major highlights now done on the kind of leathery functional bits in here, what we're going to do now is take our KARAK stone and we're going to apply a highlight to that kind of Steel Legion drab, and we're just going to pick out all of the kind of extreme highlights, and it's going to be pretty straight up. Anytime that there's any kind of edging or anything like that, we'll just go in and just touch around the edges on the extreme corners here. Any of the pieces that go up and around, you name it. Okay, on the rounded kind of highlights, I'm just going to kind of touch around the edging there, and then the strapping here, just where the folds happen. On the scabbard, obviously, we can just do like just the corner edge all the way down and around. Okay, easy peasy. And then with the boots, again, we'll do the heel of the boot. We'll do the base of the boot in here, and we're just going over just kind of those, really kind of high points there for the boots and the leathery parts. The one again we want to make sure that we don't miss is going to be that chin strap. So I'm just going to touch a bit of color onto that chin strap just to brighten it up a little bit. Okay, and then there's the belt on the inside. See, we can get that in the camera there. There we go. The belt on the inside, we're just going to do the top kind of edging of it, just to call out a little bit of that highlight. Was there something else? No, I think that's pretty much us. So, oh yeah, there's a suspender. That's what I was looking for. And then that suspender in the back. We'll just make sure it gets a little bit of touch highlight as well. All right, that's it. I'll keep working around on this. Then we'll move off to the highlight on the metallic-y pieces, and we'll do some blacklining. Okay, so the last kind of painting piece of the model, before we do the pen and blacklining there, is going to be the RUNEFANG steel on the metallic-y bits. Now, we haven't done any kind of goldish metallics on here, which is a little bit unusual, but these poor clods, they don't get any of the good stuff. So I'm going to make sure that there's not a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm just going to do an overbrush on top of kind of the larger pieces. I'll do an angled one here over the Aquila there, or the eagle, and then I'm just going to pick out some of the details just by kind of running my brush over top of it, and just doing essentially an overbrush, pulling out some of the details here for the metallic pieces. Now, believe it or not, there's actually not a whole lot of metallic on this model, so I'm just going to work my way around kind of all the iconography. And on the helmet, where we have those green pieces with those metallic elements, there's a good chance to get some stuff to really just pop on these vertical pieces here. Okay, this little piece at the back. Okay, and then especially on the gear on the back, we can pick out the bolts there. We can pick out the Aquila, the little pieces, the handle for the knife, the bayonet, and then the frag grenades as well. And then just these little clips at the bottom, which I always tend to forget, we'll make sure they get a pop of that nice silver, that nice RUNEFANG steel color. Okay. And then, of course, just finishing off the top of the las gun here. All right, so I've gone over, I've finished off the base, I've done just kind of a little dummy check around to make sure everything's set up nice the way that I like it. And we've just got one final piece. It is optional, but I think it adds a ton of personality to the model. I'm going to use a Micron pen here, and they're available at pretty much any art store. I just get them at the art supply store, and they're not crazy cheap, but they're not really expensive either, given what you can do with them. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, and whenever two colors meet, for example, the hand and the sleeve here, I'm just going to throw in a line. And if two textures meet, for example, the sleeve again here, the cuff of the sleeve, you can actually do that. So basically, yeah, anytime two colors meet or two textures meet, I'll just use the black line pen. And what it does is it gives a ton of pop and punch, and it really doesn't take too much effort to do. There was a school of thought that GW was kind of teaching and practicing for a long time, where they would paint black, and then they would just, well, essentially they would just you know, kind of paint over top, but always leave those little recesses. And it seemed like a whole lot of work to try and dodge that. And but the pen here just does such a great job of just doing just that. Now, there are little nice texture lines on this guy here, like on the tunic. I can go in and I can reline this piece here. Right, I've got this, I've got the fabric meeting here. And that little line on the tunic is nice. It gives just a little bit of kind of separation there. You know, outlining things like the pockets and all that. So, again, anywhere two colors meet or two textures meet, or there's a seam or a crease or anything like that, and I want to add a little bit of pop, I'll use the black line for that. Picking out little things like the little buttons or presses or whatever on the canteen. Super easy to do, and you just basically just essentially pop that out. On the bigger panels like the green, it definitely adds a lot of personality, and again, very simple to do. Okay, so I will work my way around here, doing everything from that little suspenders in there to the belt, the helmet, all of that. And the helmet really gets popped out, especially when we start outlining these kind of silvery bits. So I'll continue on with that, and then we'll come back and close her out. All right, after all that black lining is done, our guy's done, actually. I'm really liking the look and feel of this. Obviously, it's the classic Cadian scheme, but I really like the fact that it's a simple scheme to put together. There's not a ton of colors. There's not a ton of colors. There's not a lot of paints that you have to buy in order to make this guy a thing. So, you know, I'm really liking it. Also, if you're painting lots and lots and lots of them, it feels like, you know, you wouldn't have too hard of a time of it to make them look fairly decent on the table. It doesn't take much effort. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. I figure you can crank through these guys, you know, batch painting them 10 at a time easily. So, yeah, no, I'm thinking it's really nice. He definitely looks the Cadian part for sure. All we need now is to put the decals, as we Canadians say. All we need now is the decals to go on there, and he'll be ready to fight for the Imperium. He is without a doubt the most powerful weapon in the armory of the Imperium, the guardsman with a las gun. Awesome, awesome. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching this one. I hope it was of value. If you liked the video, hit that like button. Obviously helps the video, get the video out there. It helps along with the analytics and all the other stuff. But if you like it, just let me know what's going on. And if you want more videos just like this, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button. There's a little bell right beside it, and you get notifications on all your devices whenever we throw one out. So thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.